All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Manaverse Podcast. I'm your host, Tom Traplin, and this is the podcast where we talk about building successful, friendly local game stores. And if you ever wondered why some businesses get featured in the media while maybe your store gets ignored, is PR just for big brands, or can small businesses actually use press releases to build credibility and drive real results? If you've ever had any questions about press releases, today's guest, Mickie Kennedy, has spent over 25 years helping small businesses land media coverage that actually matters. And as the founder of eReleases, he's cracked the code on getting press releases or getting press without a big budget. Get ready for insider PR strategies that can put your business on the map. I am very excited to have Mickie on the show with me today to break down this whole wild world of press releases. Thank you for joining me, Mickie.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. I am excited to talk about this aspect of marketing that I don't normally explore. So I'm going to be educated alongside everybody who's listening as well. So this is going to be great. But before we jump into that, let's give the audience a little bit more about who you are and how you got into this whole thing.
Yeah, so my name's Mickie Kennedy. I run eReleases. I started it in 1998, so we've been around. It'll be 27 years this year. And I started with a passion for helping small businesses and entrepreneurs and authors and, basically anybody sort of DIY, do it yourself, get press releases out to the media. We have a relationship with PR Newswire, which is the oldest and largest newswire of press releases, and we go out nationally, but you can also saturate locally as well as to go out to trade publications and magazines and industry journalists and things like that. But, that being said, I think I'd mentioned to you that I know that a lot of people listening own local storefronts, gaming stores. And I think that that's one of the instances where I would not recommend using me or paying someone else. I think this is the kind of thing that you can sort of do yourself when it comes to the media. The great thing is when you get media pickup, it's recognition. It's additional people who see you. It's also the community that knows about you, rediscovering you. Maybe they've taken you for granted or forgotten about you. And, the teens who've grown up and are now parents are like, oh, yeah, I used to go. Maybe I should take my children. There's lots of ways to get the community back and re-involved. But the business has been around for a while, but even a new business is starting out. It's a great way to sort of announce yourself and, have sort of like an open house and invitation for people to come in, discover what you're offering to the community and what type of things you've got, sort of going on in regards to that. And when the media does pick you up, they include some photos. It's a great way to sort of stand out and really get some recognition.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that we've said on the podcast, or guests have said on the podcast multiple times, is that it doesn't matter how long your store has been open or been around or been in the exact same location. You'll always have people who walk by and be like, I had no idea you were here. I didn't have any, there's no idea that there's a game store in this area. It doesn't matter how big or recognized and popular you are. There's always people who don't know who you are. So having more opportunities to spread the word are always great. So for people who are like, let's say, complete novices, what is a press release? How do you even get the media to notice you?
Right. So a press release is just an announcement to the media. It's usually follows a particular format. That being said, you could write a press release, but for local media, all you really need is a pitch. And we're talking like anywhere from 2 to 3 sentences to maybe a paragraph or so, where you're sharing your event or what's newsworthy, the angle, the hook that you want to capture them and get them involved. Having an amazing quote is also a really good thing to do, because if a journalist sees something and goes, that's a soft story, it's not, breaking, but there's a really fantastic quote, that's another great way to sort of get them to say, oh, I could, that'll really make the article stand out. When I say amazing quote, what I'm talking about isn't necessarily that you're a wordsmith or Shakespeare or saying something beautiful, but you've said something very powerful and succinctly, maybe pointing out that, at a time where children are always staring at their phones, it's very refreshing that on Wednesday night, we have a room full of 20, young people playing a certain game or something like that. And it's like, oh, I could, that's really cool. I'd like to see a photo of something like that. That would make a really interesting article. And, it doesn't have to be the biting hard news that we're all used to getting. You don't need an acquisition or a merger or anything that's a multi-million dollar deal. It could be something just like that, just putting the spotlight on something that you've been doing for a while. Sharing the type of cool things that you do. If you've got you've been around a while and you've got someone who's now bringing their children in who they used to come in, maybe getting a picture of them with their children and sharing their experience. Because one of the great things about the media is they love a story arc and they love a human interest element. And I think that so many people are used to looking at corporate news and business news. And of course, that's not usually there. But a lot of the local news and community news is very, has that human interest element. And I think that that's a place where you can really shine, share a really cool thing that you've done there, maybe you've done something to benefit someone. Maybe you've given board games to a local coffee shop and it's sponsored by it or something like that. Just find little things that you feel are kind of cute or that you could tell a very charming story. And like I said, it doesn't have to take up a lot of room. We're talking a few sentences here. And, if you have photos, include those. Candid photos work best. You don't need professional shots. I think that the media has moved away from the professional shots to the more candid shots because online natural organic engagement is the best. And often people respond to the personal photos, the ones you would take with a regular iPhone or Android phone or whatever you have. So, don't overthink it. Don't feel you need a huge budget and you need professional photographs or anything like that. Just, candid shots work better. Avoid including a logo, but the logo is not important. They can just grab it from your website. The important thing is, the human interest element. And then if you can bring that across in a photo, that's a great way to stand out. And a journalist who says, hey, this isn't the biggest story, but it's got a great photo. I know that's going to help when we post it online. It's going to get a lot of engagement and people are going to really like it. And there's a little heartwarming element here or something that you're doing that's really cool. And, it really is just you building your own local Rolodex of a journalist. I tell people, if you think about it, there's probably less than a dozen people in your local area that would cover you. And with that assignment, find out who those dozen people are. If you've got a local newspaper, which I think a lot of people still do, maybe not in print anymore, or maybe it's a hybrid, just find out who generally covers communities, businesses and stores like yours, or, you see a familiar name again and again. That's a really good person. Reach out, see it online if there's an email address. If not, call and ask. People are shocked when I tell them that, but these aren't celebrities. You're not calling and say, hey, can I get Lady Gaga's email address? You're asking for someone who's a member of the community and their job is to report to the community. So any roadblocks they put up is really suspicious and they really should be willing to share their email addresses, especially if you just say, I'm a local business and I like to pitch them from time to time as I have events that I think they would be very interested in. And they'll give it to you or they'll patch you through them by phone. Whenever they say, well, just pitch me right now on the phone, which that happens occasionally, I always say, hey, I'm a shy English major. I clammed up as soon as you said that. I'd love to just put a few sentences down in an email and send them over. I could follow up and give you a call if you'd like. And then they're usually willing to give you that email address. And then, just move on. If you have, community papers, some of them are weekly. Those are really good for these things. The community papers spend 90% of their energy getting ads and keeping ads. And so they then get ready to go to print and say, oh, page 17 has nothing but ads. We need a little bit of content. So again, having a story, something like that with a couple of images, you could send it along to them. You're going to talk to the journalist who also sells ads. So be careful. They might try to turn it into an opportunity to monetize a story by advertising. If you look at it long term and a lot of times they'll say, hey, we'll do this for $700. A lot of times if you say, what would it cost to be in your weekly paper for 6 months? They'll be like, oh, $1,200. So, don't immediately sign up for $700 for one issue when, they really like long-term relationships and something they can count on again in issue after issue. So that's something to consider. And it's also appropriate to say, I just don't have an advertising budget right now, but I'll put it in next quarter and consider it, but in the meantime, I'd love to talk to you more about this story idea that I have. And everybody has their own, hardline rules when it comes to spending a little money like that. I personally believe, local weekly paper is completely appropriate to spend a little money with and test it and see how it does for you. Sometimes if you say, I know you want $700 for one ad, but $1,200 is 6 months. How about I pay, I get 2 ads for $700. And if I like it, I can upgrade to the $1,200 and just pay the balance and finish out the rest of the 6 months. And, just be creative. They're wanting to make it work. They're not making a lot of money. Weekly papers are mostly put together with duct tape and string, and not a lot of very rich people there, but a lot of people that are passionate about the community and really want to showcase businesses. Also, TV and radio might be appropriate. So if you have a TV station that sometimes does really cool things, maybe you could pitch an idea like, hey, we're doing this, we do this weekly game thing, and this is how long it's been going on. And, here's some pictures of it. We'd love to have you come in, maybe take some video of it one Wednesday and talk to you. And, maybe we have a cool person or two that we could sort of put a bullet about, this is someone who's been coming for a while, and they're, this is their reason for coming and their why of why they love playing this game. And that gives them an idea of what that would look like in a video of the game, and maybe they'd be like, yeah, that's a really cool idea. And in the cases of TV, you're not going to be talking to a writer or journalist, but a producer or booker. And so if they have community spotlights and community segments, it's good if you're just seen one recently and you call and ask, hey, I just saw you did this community spotlight on chiropractors and it looked really good on TV. And I have something similar about a local, game shop, and this is what we're doing. And I would love to pitch it to someone who is the producer or booker of that segment, or the most appropriate person that I could send an email to. And I'd like to send a couple of photos along to give them an idea of what it would look like. And again, they're like willing to share, and they'll give you that. And so once you've built this little Rolodex, it's just a matter of reaching out to them on a regular basis as you have ideas or things that events going on, or as you put your creative thinking cap on and you're thinking of something cool and just want to reach out to them. I suggest trying to do it at least quarterly so that you're on their radar. And the great thing about being on a journalist's radar is over time, you'll find you get more media pickup when you didn't pitch them. They'll be like working on a story and they'll say, I'd love to plug in a local business here. And they will think of you because you pitched them over time. And maybe they've never even covered you, but you pitched them for a year and a half and they immediately think of you, go look in their emails, discover you, reach out to you. And that's a way in which a lot of people that do this outreach do get picked up. And once you get picked up and you are out there and you've proven yourself as a good story, it's easier and easier to get picked up over time.
That makes a lot of sense. The game store environment lends itself to that sort of thing very effectively. And like you mentioned, get away from the screens, have a real human interaction, right? Because that is one of the, I would say, core functions of a game store, is that it provides a community space for people to meet each other and for people to make friends and meet new people and all of that. So there are tons and tons of human stories that are always happening at a game store, and the events, and it's just built into the model. So it should naturally lend itself to that sort of media coverage. I think maybe the disconnect for stores at the moment is that I guess they didn't have that component of people actually want to learn or they want to hear about this. You just have to go and reach out to the people who will get you connected with that world. So what it sounds like is that for a store owner who's listening to this, one of the things that they should do first, perhaps, is go check out their local newspaper and then figure out who's writing the community-based stories and just reach out to somebody. Like literally send them an email, try and call in and try and get a hold of someone. It's that simple in a way.
It is. You don't have to overcomplicate it, but just, have a nugget or a seed of an idea that you feel is worth talking about right now. I remember several years ago, there was a gaming store in Columbia, Maryland, and they were in the Baltimore Sun because a couple that who met doing gamings over the years got married, and I think they had their reception at the store, and it was a huge event, and it was like all on the sidewalk and everybody out celebrating, and it was very cute, and it was a heartwarming story, and had these really cute little pictures. I think a lot of people dressed up fantasy and things like that as well. And so it was just great. And it was a great way for that place to sort of showcase this cool thing that was happening among the, some of the customers, and people love that. And people really do love things that are different and heartwarming and things along those lines. And so, make sure there's someone recording the history that's going on in your business, because there's a lot of things that we take for granted that a lot of people would be interested in.
That I think is a really good little nugget of advice. And I like the way that you put it, recording the history of your business, the things that are happening. And you're right. I'm sure every retailer, every business owner knows how easy it is to get caught up in the whirlwind of all the things that you need to do every single day. And you kind of forget it's hard to see the story arc of your life from a distance, but having somebody chronicling that, I think, would be quite important and really give you a lot of good perspective as to like, well, here's where you started, here's where you are now, here's where the community has progressed and evolved, and all the people and all the stories that have happened with them. And I'm sure every store owner who's listening to this right now can think of, a customer that has been part of their store for 5 years, and you've seen them go from, young kid to go to college, and they're growing up, and then for the ones who are the veterans in the industry, they've seen them grow up, depart, come back with their children, and start the cycle anew. And there's definitely something there that people can connect to. That having somebody who's responsible, whether that's you as the owner or somebody that's on your team, or just someone who's like, just pay attention and just try and have some sort of a narrative historical document that keeps track of this sort of thing and makes it easier for you to tell that story to somebody else. And I think outside of the PR world, I think this is just great stuff in general. Like, these are the stories you should be sharing everywhere, not just, with your local newspapers, but also like put this on your social media, put this on anything that you put out there in the world. I think these are the things that people care about and the stories that people want to see.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that we inside of the store get sort of immune to it. I used to be actively involved in the day-to-day operations of my business, and we had a lot of cool people and weird people come through, and they were doing interesting, really different stuff. And I was always recording it and sharing it. And then I left the day-to-day operations, and I went back to the staff and said, hey, I know that we still have cool people because now we're doing like 10,000 releases a year. How about share some of the cool things? And people are like, I don't really have any. And then it's just like, really? And so it's like, think about it, going forward. And then like, oh yeah, we Jerry Garcia's wife, we work with her, and we worked with someone who was a personal assistant to share. We had this really cool thing where this guy invented a foam to try to stop hurricanes, and the military actually used him in a helicopter, not him personally, but the product, and tested it in a hurricane. And it's like, these are interesting stories. I said, and they're like, wow, we just, we do it with our head down and we're not paying attention. And I'm like, try to filter it better and be more aware of it, because they're around you. Really cool things are happening all around us. And I imagine a lot of them are happening right there in a gaming store, because, people are young, they're transitioning, they're developing, and, all of these things, people making friends, really strong friendships for the first time, people really sharing and being open, and, people having some vulnerabilities and things like that. There are possibilities there that could be explored and celebrated. Your customers love being celebrated. They like when they're doing something really cool, sharing that. And so, try to mine that stuff and capture it and record it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said that a $350 press release has outperformed a $10,000 ad campaign. say that's a pretty good claim. That's a pretty good ROI if you could make that work for you. So
Well, I mean,
how would that work?
right. So I think when it comes to gaming stores and things like that, I think that the press release is too much. I think that just a pitch directly to journalists is going to be your best bang for the buck. I mean, if you have something that's going on that you feel is like really strong and you're wanting some national attention, knowing that a lot of people that read it nationally aren't going to be customers locally, and you're okay with that, you're just looking for the authority and how that builds your reputation, then you could develop a press release and send it out. It follows a template, but again, you want to make sure that you are sort of more story based, that you have the ingredients for a story. The most popular press release that I get is a product launch, and it's devoid of story. Here's a product, here's a list of features, and here's a place to learn more. And then they're surprised that no one covered it. And I'm just like, when's the last time you saw an article about a product in a publication and all it was about was features? And I was like, Microsoft Office and Apple products, sure, but outside of the big companies, not enough people are interested. You need something more, and in that case, putting a use case study, someone who tested the product, what their experience was, having a quote from them, that's the elements of a story. So when you, as a gaming store, are looking for things that you're putting together, what are some of the ingredients of a story that would be compelling? Human interest is probably going to be right there at the top, but also, natural milestones, maybe you're holding a competition or something like that, or, a fun thing, like maybe there's a convention coming up and you guys are having a pre-gaming thing where people are showing up in costume or something like that, or they're coming collectively to the convention. There's something like that you can sort of build a story and sort of, work on that and communicate it. There's always the standards of doing a special event or tournament or something, maybe with a charity tie-in that could potentially be something that would interest. Also, I've seen lately, looking at gaming places online and trying to find some stories, I've seen like nostalgia nights where they try to attract some of the older clients who haven't really come in a while, and break out some old games or things around those themes and stuff like that have done really well, and gotten some fun pictures and then shared that after the event with the media, and they've written a story about it and included some photos and things like that. All of those can really help sort of position a story that you could just pitch to the media and go from there. I don't think that any of your pitches are probably going to generate hundreds of thousands of dollars in sales, but they can move the needle. I think, getting a few dozen more people to come in and check out the shop and consider becoming part of the game nights and things like that are probably more attainable goals, because I think the newsworthy factor is such that it's probably not going to like revolutionize your business, but it can certainly increase the number of traffic, increase sales, and it's something that's sustainable that you can continue to do at a very low cost again and again. Some of the press releases that we've sent out that have really moved the needle is like, we did one for a dining bond initiative to help restaurants that were closed early in the pandemic. And it generated over 100 articles. All the major newspapers picked it up. A lot of local newspapers picked it up, generated over $10 million in revenue. And that was the only marketing effort, just push send on a press release, and it went out there. The reason it did so well is, think about it. It's like it was early in the pandemic. We were closed for 2 weeks to flatten the curve. We were, a lot of unknowns, and there was a lot of negative news. And at that time, the media is trying to balance sentiment, and they're like, what do we have that's positive? And here was something that was positive. It was all volunteer effort. You would nominate your favorite local restaurant. If a volunteer could reach them, you would give money that went directly to them, immediately to them, and it'd be back through a dining bond, sort of like a gift certificate type scenario. And it's and it was like very nostalgic. It's like, hey, you and your partner had a favorite place you'd go on your anniversary. Here's a way to give back. And so it was something that for people at home who felt sort of lost and not able to do anything, it was something that was actionable and you could help your community. And there's ways to feed into that by being, a local business, a local gaming store. What could you do that could draw people in and sort of get people to care and to want to help out and to share people's experiences. In that case, people shared in almost every city. They would talk to local people and they'd say, "Why did you give money to this place?" And they're like, "Oh, I went here, for the last 20 years with my parents, and it was our go-to for family meals, and I would hate to lose that business." And so, what are the ways in which you can sort of take that human interest drive and translate it? What are the things that you're doing at your business that are meaningful and that you're passionate about? There's a lot of after school activities for children and things like that. And a lot of people don't think of your local gaming store as a place that has resources and things available and could be a place to help young people socialize. And that's something that I think nationwide, a lot of people are talking about is, a lot of the social skills are being lost, and that our younger people, especially having gone through a pandemic for a few years, are needing to sort of touch base and socialize more with people.
Yeah, absolutely. The need for the human connection, I think it's becoming more and more dire as time goes on. So there is this, I would say, a tremendous need for what game stores are generally providing to their communities. And I think the idea of thinking about all of the things that are happening through the lens of that story, of telling a story or what stories are being told, I think is a good way to approach the PR mindset of thinking, okay, what stories are happening? What stories can we tell? What is going on? And then just having that part of like your workflow in a sense, having somebody paying attention enough to say, okay, maybe that's the thing. We should tell somebody about this. We're running a charity event. Let's try and tie this into the things that we're trying to help out and build the community in a certain way. And just kind of having the, like you said, the Rolodex of people to just notify, knowing that maybe no one picks it up this time, but maybe nobody picks it up for months. But eventually someone's going to think of you and your store and be like, "Oh yeah, you've been reaching out for a while now, and I have this thing. We're telling this story about some sort of community involvement. We'd love to get some photos or something." And starting that snowball of having the local media, I guess, pay attention to your business is a really good way to build that authority and just have more people know what you're doing and give yourself a better shot at success overall over time. And it sounds like it sounds so easy. I think maybe that's why people don't generally do it, or more business owners don't generally think about this idea of like, well, I should have a relationship with my local newspaper reporter person because, it could be beneficial, but it's just not really part of the vocabulary. Of all the store owners I've ever talked about, I think I can name one or two who've had any real like consistent media coverage. And it feels like it's so easy. Theoretically, It sounds so easy.
And there's ways to be really creative, and brainstorm. Sometimes it might be bringing in a spouse or your family and say, what can we do that's really cool and fun? And, I know that, game stores have a variety and a lot of them have a lot of different focuses, but, board games is something that people have a lot of nostalgia for. And, I think that for some people, like my local insurance broker sends me some Harry and David gift basket every year that almost has nothing in it but packaging. But I know that it costs over $100. And I was like, you know what? If they had dropped off like an old game that I played when I was young, like Twister or something like that, with a thoughtful card that sort of said, "Do you ever feel like you're being stretched every which way?" And there's a way in which you could really build up a little campaign and reach out to businesses and say, "Hey, we'd love to provide you with this really cool marketing idea that we're doing with some select businesses this year, where you ship out 100 of these board games to local customers rather than spend money on what you normally do. And I guarantee you people will tell others about it because no one else is doing something like this. So, think outside the box, do something creative. And then you might get some media attention on top of that. But if not, you bring in some people, you've made some sales, and you've also got a new line of businesses that you could sell stuff to and get people involved. Businesses are busy, and a lot of them just like to take stuff off their list, and when it comes to like holiday gifts and cards and things like that, they just sort of go through the motion, and they don't mind just spending $100 on each customer, and yet that customer barely remembers it, or they're like me thinking, gosh, I know this person paid $100 for this gift basket here, but it's really got like one pack of cocoa, like 3 truffles and some chocolate covered pretzels, and it's all packaging, and I know they spent $100 on it. But if I receive something fun and thoughtful with a really little message of why they chose this year, that I think that there's a way to really stand out. And I think that when it comes to marketing as a local game store, I think that being creative is your strength, and how you can really stand out and sort of get people motivated and behind you and potentially wanting to do business with you.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that I've recommended quite a bit is the idea of getting outside of your own 4 walls and being more just out there, right? And sometimes that means connecting with community centers and schools and trying to organize, after school programs or something, if that's the vibe that you're going for, if that's your store. But like, that sounds like a great idea. Like, there's obviously a tremendous overlap. You just have to make those connections with the other businesses in your field. And I don't think, putting words in people's mouths, I would assume that most store owners don't think of their local like insurance broker as somebody that they should have a relationship with that could be like a viable like business relationship where they could benefit each other in ways that you wouldn't think in a typical environment, but it totally could. And that just,
like,
again,
if you came by at the end of the summer to your local insurance broker and dropped off a game with a message that said, imagine that you've just dropped this game on a customer's kitchen table right around the holidays, and you say in your message something along the lines of this, isn't that much more impactful than a $100 gift basket or whatever thing that you normally do to reach out to your best customers? Think of us. We're a local game store. I'd love to share this idea and others with you. Here's my number. And just putting that less than $20 thing on their desk is going to get them to think about you and get them to say, I've never paid attention to this local game store, and potentially this could be a really cool idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the weirdness of some of the things that game stores sell is one of the strengths here.
Definitely.
I saw a post the other day from a store owner who went to a trade show and that sort of thing. And like you said, most of the stuff, most of the swag, the products, all those things that publishers and manufacturers hand out to be like, hey, think of us, buy from us. We want to provide your products for your customers. Most of it just kind of gets left behind somewhere. It's not really memorable. But the one thing that the guy remembered was the guy, I think it was a publisher, gave the person a box cutter. And that is insanely useful as a store that opens 1 million boxes a year. So he's like, every time I open the box, there's the logo of the person who gave me the thing. And this is incredibly helpful. And it's just those little things that can become like this touchstone that can change the way people think about you and your store. And I really like that idea. So I was trying to how does this factor into things? I like that a lot. I think the storytelling and the human connection part, I think all of this overlaps so beautifully with what stores do that, the thing that you should be doing if you're listening to this right now is thinking about, okay, do I have my newspaper? Do I know anybody who might be in the media? I'm going to go reach out to somebody today. And there's definitely a story that you can tell that you can just pitch them. Hey, I've got this idea. We're running this event. It's going to be really cool. We have lots of people, lots of really interesting people. We would love for somebody to come down and just see all the cool things that are happening and just kind of just start that process of outreach, and then try to make that part of your regular everyday routine to, once a week, once a month, whatever, just have somebody reach out to someone in the media and try and get these stories shared. Because I feel like it's probably one of the It's the lowest hanging fruit. It's something so easy. That's just time and effort to get that ball rolling. And I think now they know what to do. They know that they can go reach out to these people. They don't have to be worried or scared that, like you said, they're not celebrities. They want to hear from you, probably. Most of these people are probably dying to tell a good story.
And I think that one of the things that you can do is sort of enlist your own customers to share stories as well. Like maybe if you have a newsletter, have a customer spotlight where you ask people to either send their stories along or nominate someone with a really interesting story and sort of collect those. And again, as people read your newsletter, a lot of time it's just information releases, new things coming out. But here's something to get people the human interest element involved. And when it's a cool story, or someone's doing something really zany or fun, it gets people excited. It's that human interest element, and it really gets people to start looking forward to your newsletter. Like, oh, this is really, something, a part that I really look forward to seeing every time. And, maybe you reward people quarterly with whoever sends in a story or nominates someone and we pick it, you get a $50 gift certificate or something like that, or you get put in a drawing that we do quarterly or something along those lines. And all it takes is just a tiniest little bit of motivation for people to want to just say, oh yeah, I will start filtering stuff, thinking about that, because just like my employees who had stopped realizing what cool people we worked with, sometimes you need to be like put on notice, and so they can start filtering that stuff and looking for those opportunities.
Yeah, I love it. I tell clients and people who are listening to ask for reviews. That's a big component of a lot of the online business marketing world. Ask for reviews, get people to give you more reviews. Generally, it's great, and a lot of the times the reviews have the story built into it. Like if someone takes the time to write this long paragraph about how they came into your store and this person, helped them find the exact game that they were looking for. And they talked to my son and he, treated them really well, like he was an adult, and all this, positive sentiment. Those are perfect little encapsulated, stories that you can use that, not only help your business, but also like maybe that is something that you can turn into something else. It's another way to create those connections. So yeah, I loving all of us. But we're coming up to time. So if you have any last words of advice to retailers who are listening to this and they're thinking about this particular topic, what would you say to somebody who's listening right now and they're thinking, what should I do next?
I would say don't be afraid of PR. Don't be afraid of reaching out to the media. A lot of people believe that they're too small to matter. But the truth is, journalists like covering small businesses, like putting the spotlight on businesses that people don't know about or have taken for granted. They don't get a lot of accolades or huge engagement on their articles about the big giant companies they have to cover. The most engagement that they often get are the local stories they do about a business that people didn't realize was there, or that they were doing something really cool right there in their own community. All it does is take a little bit of creativity, a little bit of ownership by just doing it. And don't overthink it. Just a few sentences in an occasional pitch to members of the media. Build your own little Rolodex, and don't be discouraged if not much happens the first year. But what I found is generally by year and a half mark, you start getting your first stories, and people who stick with it at year 3, they can look back and they've usually got 4 or 5 mentions and articles and things that they've done in the media. And then going forward, it's usually 2 or 3 a year. And again, it's really just coming up with a pitch quarterly that they can just send out to all of these places in their own little Rolodex. So it's just something that they can replicate and get out there. And sometimes it's something you're probably pushing in your newsletter anyways. So you can take some of that language, maybe make it a little bit shorter and succinct, and then just pitch and do that. And if you do that over time, you will see the results. Just keep that creative thinking cap on, and just keep trying and testing different things.
Excellent. And if listeners wanted to reach out to you, where can they go to find out more about what you do?
So my website's eReleases.com. All my social media is on the lower bottom, including my direct LinkedIn. I do have a free masterclass that could be useful to people. It sort of helps you sort of realize what a journalist is looking for. It's the more strategic types of PR that you can do. And if anyone wants to do that, it's completely free. It's a video masterclass that's less than an hour long. And that's at eReleases.com/plan, PLAN. And again, completely free. I'm really big into education and resources and getting people to succeed. Take advantage of it, because I know people have told me I should make it a 12-hour class and charge $1,000 for it. But my goal at the end of the day is to get people doing PR effectively and learning what's working, because we do 10,000 releases a year. I see the press releases that do get picked up and the patterns that the media reacts to. And some of those could be good lessons for anybody who's interested in PR.
Excellent. I love free resources, and obviously my audience also loves that kind of stuff. So if you're listening to this, go check that out. And all those links will be in the show notes. They'll be in the descriptions. Wherever you're consuming this podcast, they'll be in there. Well, thank you very much for joining me, Mickie. I really appreciate it. It was a really fun conversation and really enlightening. And yeah, I had a really good time.
Thank you.
All right. We'll talk to everybody again in the next episode of the Manaverse Podcast.